Good evening, this is Nerd the Human, and welcome to this guide for how to unlock the Mongol Horde faction on Medieval 2 Total War. If you've been around a while, you may be aware that there is a guide for the Mongols already, but that one is focused on starting off with a settlement and playing a conventional campaign. This one is specifically for those of you who want to play as a Horde, just like in my latest series. So let's get into the files. The first job for any modding on Medieval 2 is to unpack the files, as well as edit your preference file. If you need to do this, then there is a separate guide for that popping up at the top now. Firstly, we need to edit the deska_strat file, and to do that we're going to need to head inside the data folder, down into world, into maps, campaign, imperial campaign, and then you can find the file deska_strat. Once inside, we first need to cut the Mongols from the non-playable into the playable section, like so. Next we head down the files towards the Mongols and we simply delete this line here, dead until resurrected. Now we need to choose a city to give the Mongols and kind of paste it to the Mongol section. So I'm going to simply take London as it's the first city on the list. So head up to London, select all of the settlement details, cut that, making sure to sort out your formatting as you go. Head back down to the Mongols, and then we can paste in the settlement down here. The trick here is that we're actually leaving the English troops to spawn in the city. So in effect we do start with London, but the English troops are occupying it immediately, and so we become a horde instantaneously. Next, we need a leader, and whilst you can fill this in manually, it is probably best to head to the campaign_script file, where it details the hordes that are due to arrive. We need to edit this file a little later anyway. Heading to campaign_script is simple, as it's in the same folder as deska_strat. Once opened up, you can see that the Mongol hordes are listed near the top of the file. What I will do for now is highlight the first 3 armies here, and copy before heading back to deska_strat. Where I will paste them in and we can do some editing. Underneath the London settlement I will paste the generals, and from here we'll need to format our characters. If you need an example for this, then you can just look further up the file. It does give you plenty of suitable examples. To start with though, we're simply going to add in an extra bit of information here. We're going to add army down below the character traits and the units. We also need to delete a few little bits and pieces. So between each army we need to get rid of end, spawn army and faction Mongols, just leaving a line between each of the armies. With some extra formatting complete then, we now need to make one of these characters our leader, and to do that we need to label him as male and leader. You can choose any character you'd like, and if you need an example you can always scroll up once again where you can see another example from the computer here. Named character, male, leader, followed by the age and their coordinates. If you want more horde armies, or indeed all the horde armies, then you can head back to the campaign_script file and transfer them over by repeating this process. When you scroll down to the next batch, you'll notice that they have the same coordinates as the first 3 armies that we transferred over. Luckily though, the game does include some alternative coordinates for whether you want them to spawn in Sarkel, Yerevan or Baghdad. So simply all I'm going to do is take these 4 sets of coordinates and replace the original coordinates here with the new ones. So with order we're going to change it to 288 106, and we'll continue doing the same for the other 3 before we copy and paste them and transfer them over to deska_strat. Of course you do need to repeat the slight formatting tweaks, just like we did the first time. With Hebe's 3 armies we're going to remove these 3 lines, add army in between, and make sure we've got the correct spacing for all of our armies. Back inside campaign_script then, and you can of course scroll down and repeat this process with the final 4 armies using a different set of coordinates, such as those given for Baghdad down here at the bottom. With these last 4 armies in place, there is one more thing we need to change, and you may well have noticed that most of the characters in the file will label them as male, and indeed as haven't got that. All of these characters we've added in are missing that. So just make sure you add in male, as we already have done for the leader and I already have done further up the file, I'm removing family from later on because we just want the file, our coding, to be consistent with this file as much as possible. So now it looks like our file is ready to load up the game. One quick thing before we check in on our Mongol friends is that I want to show you how you can pick any coordinates on the map should you, for example, want to start your armies off here in the lovely fields of England. So hover your cursor where you want and you can press the apostrophe to open up the command console, and if you type in show_Cursorstat and press enter, it will give you the coordinates for where your cursor is pointing, currently around Milton Keynes-ish kind of area. So 108, 149 would be the coordinates for that. You can actually see here that playing as England, we've got our people in flight, the Mongols, and you can see that our horde has indeed worked. So let's load up our Mongol campaign and see what it looks like. Here we are then with Hebe the Mauler. And indeed you can see we've spawned up here towards the top of the map with the next set of troops, Subutai and whatnot, standing up here in the Caucasus Mountains, and down in Baghdad we can see the rest of them, Kurakana, Bakwa and Helegu, and all of those good fun people. Our armies have spawned in and we've got ourselves a wonderful horde. Now you might well be aware, by the way, that they don't have any upkeep cost. In some ways that's not really a problem when you play as a horde. Indeed, as long as you are a horde you won't have to pay the upkeep. Some units such as these do have upkeep, but you won't actually be paying them in the meantime. As long as you are a horde not settled, you won't be paying those upkeep. It will only be mercenaries should you actually hire any. At this point we might seem like we're essentially done, and we essentially are. And you can see as we go and take this small castle of Bolga, we can occupy or we can indeed sack and move on. And that is very much what we of course are looking for. But there is one small problem a bit further down the line. The issue comes when the scripted hordes arrive. Remember, we haven't edited the campaign_script file, we simply copied the army composition for sake of ease. At the moment on turn 67, we can sack the settlement, as you might well expect, and then when the Mongols arrive, indeed, we can see the first little force has appeared over in the mountains near Yerevan. The game decides to change. As soon as the horde event happens, strangely the faction stops acting like a horde and you are forced to settle. So if we take Tripoli for example, we now don't have the option of becoming a horde and running off to sack the next settlement. We can only settle down. This sadly means that you can't be both a horde faction and script reinforcement horde to arrive later in the game. Heading back into campaign_script then, we are forced to remove the hordes. On the Total War Center forums, I have seen it insisted that you do need to leave a horde scripted for the Mongol hordes to work properly, but the trick is to script it so late in the game that it will never affect you. Here you can see that I have highlighted the entire Mongol horde script, and I'm simply going to delete it and insert a simple script for a horde to appear at turn 500. And with that, the composition of the army doesn't really matter to me, as I never plan on it still being relevant, and I don't plan on still playing by the time it actually arrives. To be honest, I couldn't find any more information on the forum as to why removing the hordes completely would adversely affect the horde, but in coding sometimes it suffices to simply accept that a solution works. So I'm happy to nod along and save my script as it is. I'll put this in a little comment or in the description in case you don't want to type out this word for word. But I'm simply going to save it, and then we are ready to get going once more. If I were to tease you for part 2 with one piece of critical advice, is that you probably want to keep a close eye on your family tree, as it can be very easy to lose all of your family members. I do have a guide on tweaking your family tree if you want more details on that in the meantime. On my current campaign though, you can see that I've made 4 of my generals part of the family, given them wives and added some children. With no cities, the game will not be giving you children any time soon. Even if you make your generals disgustingly fertile like I did, it doesn't seem to have worked though. Luckily, as long as you have space in your army, your general's child can come of age and will join the horde. That is all for today. Thank you for joining me, and let me know how your Mongol campaigns go. As mentioned, I will put out part 2 next Friday, so do join me for that. And of course, the Mongol Horde series will continue as ever on Monday. Thank you verily, and goodbye. Send in the camels, those shiny, smelly camels. Oh, my anarchy. loosed upon the world, apart from over here where we're kind of routed. Stupidity got us into this mess. Stupidity will get us out of it, damn it. We will have a last stand at some point. But it's not today!